My roommate stole my emergency money, and now she's begging me not to report her. I've always been a pretty laid-back person, but what happened a few weeks ago changed everything. It started as a small, innocent mistake, but what I discovered turned into a nightmare. My roommate, someone I trusted, had taken my emergency savings, money I had set aside for a situation I never thought I'd need. Now, she's begging me not to report her, and I'm stuck in this moral dilemma that's eating me alive. I never thought I'd be in this position, but here I am. This is the story of how my roommate betrayed my trust, took something that wasn't hers, and now expects me to let her off the hook. The question is, should I? It was just an ordinary Tuesday when I noticed something was off. I had gone to my usual spot, my old worn-out leather wallet tucked away in a drawer where I'd kept my emergency money for years. It was the one place where I knew I could rely on, and I'd been meticulous about keeping it safe. I'd always been cautious with money, especially since moving out on my own, and I knew that life could throw curveballs at any moment. But when I went to check it, it was empty. At first I thought I was mistaken. Maybe I'd taken the money out earlier and forgotten. But no, there was no denying it. It was gone. Every last penny of the $1,200 I had saved up for an emergency was missing. My stomach sank as I realized what must have happened. I ran through every possibility in my head. Who else could have had access to my drawer? It wasn't like I had anyone over recently. My roommate Sarah was the only other person who had been in my room, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. After all, we had always gotten along so well. Sarah had never given me any reason to distrust her, but as I stood there, staring at the empty drawer, the sinking feeling in my chest grew. I knew I had to confront her, but I also didn't want to believe it. It was hard to imagine that the person I shared a living space with would betray me like this. But deep down, I knew I had to get to the bottom of it. I spent the next few hours pacing around the apartment, waiting for Sarah to come home. My mind was racing. How could she do this? What was going through her head? Was it really her? I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't ignore the gut feeling I had. When she finally walked in, I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Sarah, we need to talk," I said, my voice shaking a little. She looked at me, her expression puzzled. "What's up?" "I'm missing something," I said, keeping my voice as steady as I could. "My emergency savings. It's gone, and I need to know if you took it." Her face went pale. "What? No, I didn't take your money." But I could tell she was lying. Her voice cracked just slightly, and her eyes darted around the room as if she were searching for something, anything, to distract me. That's when I knew. "I need you to be honest with me, Sarah. Did you take it?" I asked, this time with more force. She was silent for a long moment, her eyes filled with guilt. Then, finally, she spoke. I didn't mean to. I was desperate, and I thought I could pay it back before you noticed. Please don't be mad at me. I didn't want to cause any trouble." I was stunned. The weight of her words hit me like a ton of bricks. Sarah, the person I'd trusted to share my space with, the person I thought was a friend, had taken my emergency savings. And to make it worse, she was trying to justify it as if it was somehow okay. "You took my money?" I repeated, struggling to keep my voice steady. "How could you do that, Sarah? That money wasn't just sitting there. It was there for when something happened, for emergencies." Sarah's face turned red, and she bit her lip. I know, and I feel terrible about it, but I had no choice. I was behind on rent, and I didn't want to tell you. I thought I could just borrow it for a couple of days until I got my paycheck. But then something else came up, and I didn't have enough, and I just kept pushing it off, thinking I'd make it right, but I didn't. I stood there, speechless. My head was spinning, trying to process everything she was saying. I had been working so hard to save that money, just in case anything went wrong, but I never imagined I'd be betrayed like this, by someone who knew how important it was to me. "I'm really sorry," Sarah added, her voice trembling. "Please don't report me. I know I messed up, but I'll pay you back. I swear. Just don't tell anyone. Please." It was clear that she was scared, but I wasn't sure what I was supposed to feel. Should I be angry, hurt, confused? Honestly, I didn't know. All I knew was that my trust had been shattered. I'd been putting my money in that drawer for emergencies, and now I felt like I couldn't trust the one person I thought I could count on. "You're begging me not to report you?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Sarah, this isn't just about money. You took something from me, something I can't replace. I trusted you. How do you think I'm supposed to move forward from this? She looked at me with wide eyes, almost pleading. I know it was wrong, but I didn't know what else to do. Please, I'm begging you. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her how much this hurt, how much this breach of trust affected me. But instead, I stayed quiet for a long time, trying to process everything. The silence stretched on until it felt suffocating. Finally, I said, I don't know what to do, Sarah. I want to believe you, I really do. But how do I know you'll pay me back? How can I ever trust you again after this? I swear I'll pay you back, she said desperately. I'm in a bad place right now. I didn't mean for it to get this far. I sat down on the couch, trying to process everything. Sarah was standing there, looking as though she'd been caught in a lie that she couldn't escape. Her hands were clasped in front of her, her eyes pleading, but all I could think about was how deeply this had hurt me. She had crossed a line. The money wasn't just money, it was my safety net. It was there for emergencies, for when something unexpected happened. The whole point of it was that it was untouchable. And yet, she'd taken it, thinking she could get away with it. I couldn't believe it. I looked at her, trying to read her face, but I wasn't sure what to think. She looked genuinely sorry. But did I believe her? Did I trust her enough to let it slide? Could I ever look at her the same way again? I don't know, Sarah, I said slowly, feeling my frustration rise. You're telling me that you're sorry, but that doesn't make it okay. You stole from me. She winced at the word stole, and I immediately regretted using it. I didn't want to make her feel worse, but that was the reality of what had happened. I didn't mean to steal it, she said quickly. It was a stupid decision, but I didn't want to lose my place here. I'm sorry. I'll pay you back. I just need some time. I took a deep breath. The problem wasn't the money, it was the trust. I didn't know if I could believe her. I didn't know if I could trust that she would pay me back. And more importantly, I didn't know if I could trust her ever again. Time, I repeated. Sarah, this isn't something you just pay back. This is about respect. You knew how much that money meant to me. How could you not think about that before taking it? She lowered her head, not able to meet my eyes. I didn't think, okay? I was desperate, and I really thought I could pay it back without you noticing. I didn't think you'd be so angry. I thought it was just a small thing. But it wasn't small to me, I said, my voice tightening. I put that money away for a reason, and now I feel like I can't trust you. That's bigger than the money. I don't know how to deal with that. For a moment, we both just sat there in silence, the weight of everything hanging between us. Sarah was still standing, shifting from foot to foot nervously. I was seated, staring at my hands, trying to think. My mind was racing. I felt conflicted. I wanted to forgive her. I wanted to believe her. But something inside me was telling me that forgiving her without any consequences would be a mistake. Please don't report me, she said again, her voice barely above a whisper. Please, I'll make it right. I don't want to lose everything. I looked at her, my heart torn. It wasn't just the money. It was what this had done to our relationship. It was the betrayal of trust. The thought of involving authorities made my stomach turn. But what else was I supposed to do? I couldn't just let it slide. The days that followed were filled with tension. I couldn't stop thinking about what Sarah had done and what it meant for our relationship moving forward. The trust we'd built over the past few years had been shattered, and I didn't know how to piece it back together. She had apologized, begged for forgiveness, and promised to make things right. But a part of me wondered if it was all just talk. How could I ever be sure? We hadn't spoken much in the past few days. Sarah had been quiet, retreating to her room when she wasn't at work. I could tell she was avoiding me, probably because she knew I was still processing everything, but I couldn't keep ignoring it. The whole situation was eating me alive, and I knew I had to make a decision. I decided it was time for another conversation. I needed to set some clear boundaries, and we needed to discuss what was going to happen next. I called her into the living room after dinner one night, my heart pounding as I prepared to lay it all out. When she walked in, her eyes were downcast, and she looked like she was bracing for another confrontation. I didn't want to yell, and I didn't want to act out of anger, but I knew that I had to be firm and clear with her. Sarah, we need to talk, I said, my voice steady but serious. She nodded silently and took a seat across from me. The silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. I took a deep breath and decided to start with the one thing that had been eating at me. "You stole my money, Sarah," I said, looking directly at her. "I'm not going to sugarcoat it. That's what happened." Her face flushed, and she opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. "I'm not accusing you of being a bad person, but this was a huge breach of trust. You had access to something I held sacred, something that I worked hard to save, and you took it. No matter how desperate you were, that's what happened." She looked down, and her lip trembled slightly, but she didn't argue. "I know. I'm sorry. I know it was wrong." I shook my head, feeling the weight of the situation settle in my chest. "Sorry doesn't cut it, Sarah. I've been thinking about this for days, and I'm struggling with what to do next. You've asked me not to report you, but what if I just let you off the hook? What happens the next time you're in a tight spot?" "I won't do it again," she said quickly, almost pleading. "I swear, I learned my lesson. I don't want to lose your trust. I'll do anything to make it right." I looked at her, torn. Part of me wanted to believe her. She seemed genuine. But another part of me, the part that had been burned, was telling me that it wasn't enough. That saying sorry wasn't enough to rebuild everything we'd lost. "Here's the thing, Sarah," I said, my voice quiet. "I don't know if I can just let this go. I don't know if I can trust you again, and I'm scared that if I do, I'll just end up getting hurt." Her face fell, and I saw the guilt and regret in her eyes. "I get that. I really do. But please don't report me. Please don't make it worse than it already is. I can't afford to lose everything right now." Her words hit me like a punch in the stomach. I knew what it was like to feel like everything was falling apart. But I also knew that if I didn't stand my ground now, I might end up enabling her bad choices down the road. After our conversation, I spent the next couple of days thinking about everything. The guilt Sarah was showing seemed real, but that didn't change the fact that she had stolen from me. I couldn't just sweep it under the rug and pretend like it never happened. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that reporting her wasn't the solution either. I didn't want to destroy her life over one mistake, but at the same time, I couldn't allow this to become something that would repeat itself. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the boundaries I had to set, both for her and for myself. This wasn't just a borrowed amount. This was something she had taken, something she thought I wouldn't notice. She had shown me in a way that she felt entitled to my possessions, and that was something I couldn't overlook. I decided to have one last conversation with Sarah, where I would make my decision clear. I needed to lay out the consequences of her actions, but I also needed to give her an opportunity to show me that she was genuinely trying to change. I didn't want to make any hasty decisions, but I knew this situation couldn't drag on any longer. That evening, I called her into the living room once again. The tension in the air was thick. Sarah seemed anxious, probably wondering what I was going to do next. I couldn't blame her. I'd been flip-flopping in my mind for days. "Sarah, we need to talk again," I started, my voice steady, but still carrying the weight of everything I was feeling. "I've thought long and hard about what's happened, and I've been torn about what to do." Her face was pale, and she nodded, waiting for me to continue. "I'm not going to report you to the authorities," I said, watching her face relax slightly. "But this doesn't mean everything is forgiven. You violated my trust, and that's something I can't just ignore. We can't go back to the way things were before." She looked at me with wide eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, relief flooding her face. "Thank you so much. I swear I'll pay you back. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." "I'm glad you're relieved, but that's not all of it," I said, shaking my head. "We need to set some boundaries. I'm going to need to see some real change here, Sarah. You need to pay me back, and you need to show me that you're serious about respecting my space, my belongings, and my trust. If you don't do that, then I'm not sure I can continue living with you." Her face fell again, and she looked like she wanted to say something, but she held back. "I understand," she said softly. "I don't want to lose your trust. I'll work on making things right." I could see the sincerity in her eyes. She wasn't just apologizing to get out of trouble. She genuinely seemed willing to change. But that didn't mean the damage had been undone. I had to stick to my decision, and I couldn't let her off the hook so easily. "I'm willing to give you a chance," I said, looking at her squarely. "But it's up to you to show me that I can trust you again. We'll start with paying back the money, and we'll go from there." Sarah nodded, a look of determination in her eyes. "I will. I promise." As she left the room, I sat back, feeling a little lighter, but still uncertain. I had made my decision, but I knew it wasn't going to be an easy road. there was still a lot of healing to be done, both in terms of trust and understanding. The next few weeks were a mixture of awkward tension and tentative efforts to rebuild trust. Sarah did what she said she would. She started making regular payments to pay me back. It wasn't a huge amount at first, but it was a start. And even though I had said I wouldn't report her, a part of me still felt uneasy. Every time she left the house or made an excuse to go out, my mind would start racing. Was she being honest about the money? Was she really committed to changing? I kept reminding myself that I had made the right decision, but it wasn't easy. Every day felt like a test. I couldn't ignore what had happened, but I didn't want to continue punishing Sarah either. I also realized something important. It wasn't just about the money. It was about what this situation had done to our relationship. I had to be patient, not just with her, but with myself. One evening, as we were sitting in the kitchen, Sarah turned to me, her face serious. "I know I've been making things right with the money, but I need to tell you something. I don't want to just be sorry. I want to show you that I'm working on being better." I looked up from my plate, surprised by the sudden shift in her tone. "What do you mean?" "I've been thinking a lot about everything," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "And I don't just want to fix the money situation. I want to earn back your trust. So I've started looking for another job. I don't want to keep relying on people, especially you. I want to be independent again." I stared at her, a little taken aback. This was the first time she'd shown any real initiative to improve beyond just paying me back. I could see the genuine desire to change in her eyes, and I appreciated that. It was a step in the right direction, a sign that she was ready to take responsibility for her actions in a way that went beyond words. "Sarah, that means a lot to me," I said, feeling a weight lift off my chest. "I know this hasn't been easy, and I appreciate the effort you're putting in. But this is a process. It's not just about paying back the money. It's about rebuilding everything." She nodded. "I get it, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Over the next few weeks, Sarah followed through on her promise. She got a second job, worked hard, and kept up with her payments. It wasn't perfect, and there were still moments of awkwardness between us, but little by little, she was proving herself. And more importantly, I was starting to trust her again. But the real turning point came when Sarah sat me down one evening with no distractions, just the two of us. She had a look of determination on her face. "I've paid back everything," she said, her voice steady. "I know I've let you down, and I don't expect things to be perfect, but I want to prove to you that I can be someone you can trust again. I know I messed up, and I know I hurt you, but I'm ready to make this right." It was that moment, when she fully admitted her mistakes, when she didn't just try to explain them away, that everything started to change. I felt the last bit of doubt slip away. "I believe you," I said, my voice filled with sincerity. "It's not easy, but you're showing me that you can change. And that's all I needed to see." She smiled, the weight of the last few weeks lifting from her shoulders. "Thank you. You have no idea how much this means." Time, as they say, heals all wounds, but not without effort. While Sarah was doing everything she promised, there were still moments of doubt. I had learned to be cautious again, and the trust we were rebuilding felt fragile, like walking on a tightrope. Every now and then, I'd catch myself wondering if she was really changing or just pretending to make things right. I had given her a chance, but I couldn't ignore the fact that she'd taken advantage of me before. However, as the weeks passed, the small things began to shift. She became more open, more communicative. She kept up with the payments and even started helping more around the house. Little things that showed me she wasn't just focused on making things right financially, but also on repairing the trust she had broken. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were moments when I'd catch her making excuses or avoiding a conversation about something that seemed important. It wasn't often, but when it did happen, I couldn't help but feel a sense of déjà vu. It reminded me of the person she had been before, the person who thought taking my money without asking was acceptable. Then came the moment that tested everything I had learned so far. One of her old friends came to town. Sarah had mentioned him in passing before, someone she'd known for years, a guy who had often stayed over at our apartment. But something about his visit felt off. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The night he arrived, I was sitting on the couch when Sarah walked in with him. They were laughing, reminiscing about old times. I could see the familiarity in their interaction, and I immediately felt a pit in my stomach. Was there something more to this friendship? Was I letting my guard down too quickly? "Hey, I hope you don't mind, but James is staying the night," Sarah said casually. "He's just passing through and we were talking about old times." I smiled politely, trying to hide the discomfort I felt. "Of course, no problem." But in the back of my mind, red flags were going off. Why hadn't Sarah mentioned the details of his visit? Why was he staying over so unexpectedly? Was she trying to hide something from me? That night, I stayed awake for longer than usual, listening to their conversation from the other side of the wall. It wasn't anything unusual at first, just old stories, laughter, and catching up. But then I heard Sarah say something that made my blood run cold. "I'm just glad things are better now," she said. "I was so scared he'd kick me out, but I knew I had to fix things." My heart sank. Was she talking about me? Was she referring to the money she had taken? Was she scared that I would really throw her out, even though she was doing better? I couldn't take it anymore. I had to confront her. I waited until James had left the next morning, and I called Sarah into the living room. "Who was that guy?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm but firm. "James," she said, a little too casually. "You've met him before." "Why didn't you tell me he was staying the night?" I asked, my tone sharp now. She hesitated, clearly caught off guard. "I didn't think it was a big deal. It's just James." "No, it's not just James," I said. "You're acting like this is no big deal, but it's my house. You're supposed to be building trust with me, not hiding things." Her face flushed, and she looked down, suddenly embarrassed. "I didn't mean to hide anything. It's just, I didn't want you to get upset. I thought it would be fine." "It's not fine, Sarah," I said, shaking my head. "I can't keep letting things slide. We've been through a lot, and if we're going to make this work, you need to be open and honest with me. No more hiding things." She looked at me, her eyes full of regret. "You're right. I'm sorry. I should have told you." I took a deep breath. "I'm not asking for perfection, but I need honesty, and I need to know that you're not going to slip back into old habits." "I won't," she said quietly. "I promise." The confrontation with Sarah was a turning point for both of us. I could see the sincerity in her eyes, but I also knew that actions spoke louder than words. She had promised me that things would change, but I had been let down before. Now, more than ever, I needed to see a consistent effort from her. In the days following our talk, Sarah seemed more aware of her actions. She communicated more openly with me and started to ask for my opinion on things instead of just going about her own business. It was like a switch had been flipped. The old Sarah, the one who had hidden things from me, seemed to be fading away, and in her place was someone who genuinely seemed to want to make amends. But I couldn't deny that it was still hard for me to fully trust her. The doubts crept in during quiet moments when I wasn't thinking about anything else. I'd find myself wondering if she was still hiding something, or if she'd go back to her old ways. It wasn't that I didn't believe her anymore. It was just that the scars from what had happened were still there. One evening after dinner, Sarah sat down next to me on the couch. She looked at me with a serious expression. "I know it's been hard for you," she said softly. "I know you're still unsure if I'm really changing, and I get it. But I need you to know that I'm not the same person I was when I took your money. I've been working on myself, and I want to prove that to you." Her words hit me in a way I wasn't expecting. There was something about the way she said it, with the kind of vulnerability I hadn't seen before, that made me believe her a little more. Maybe she was truly changing. Maybe she was finally getting it. "I appreciate you saying that," I said quietly. "It's been hard for me too. I've been so focused on making sure I don't get hurt again that I've been holding back. But I'm trying, Sarah. I'm trying to let go of the anger and trust you again." She nodded, her eyes full of emotion. "I don't want you to feel like that anymore. I want to earn your trust. I'll do whatever it takes." The truth was, I didn't know if I could ever fully erase what had happened. The betrayal had left its mark on me, and the road to recovery was still long. But in that moment, I realized something important. Rebuilding trust wasn't about erasing the past. It was about moving forward, one step at a time. It wasn't going to be easy, and there would be more bumps along the way, but we were both willing to put in the work, and that was enough for now. A few months passed since that last conversation, and things between Sarah and me started to feel more balanced. We didn't have to walk on eggshells around each other anymore, and the trust I had lost was slowly starting to rebuild, piece by piece. It wasn't perfect, There were still moments when I caught myself feeling uncertain, but we were learning how to communicate better and work through the issues together. Sarah continued to stick to her promises. She paid back the money without missing a single payment, and she kept up with her part of the rent and responsibilities around the house. The old tension that had existed between us began to fade, and I noticed that, in many ways, we had grown closer. We didn't just have a shared living space anymore. We had become partners, working together toward a common goal of trust, understanding, and respect. But it wasn't just the practical things that had changed. There was a deeper shift. I could see that Sarah was genuinely trying to be more responsible, not just with money, but in her day-to-day actions. She had stopped looking for shortcuts or excuses, and I saw her taking more pride in her work, in her relationships, and in her growth as a person. One night, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, something so simple that it felt like a gift after everything we'd been through, Sarah turned to me. "Hey, I just want to say thank you," she said, her voice soft but sincere, "for giving me another chance. I know I messed up, but I'm really grateful you didn't just give up on me." I smiled at her, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't felt in months. "You earned it, Sarah. I'm proud of you, and I'm glad I didn't give up either." It wasn't just about forgiveness anymore. It was about moving forward, creating new memories together, and letting go of the past. We were learning how to live together again, not as roommates, but as people who had both been through something difficult and had come out stronger on the other side. And that was the most important lesson I had learned. Trust isn't given easily, but when it's earned, it's worth more than anything. So, where do we go from here? The truth is, rebuilding trust takes time. It takes effort, vulnerability, and a willingness to face the hard stuff together. But if both sides are committed to growth, change, and honesty, it's possible to rebuild, even from something as painful as betrayal. Have you ever been in a situation where trust was broken? How did you handle it? Did you find a way to rebuild the relationship, or did it end up too broken to fix? Drop a comment below and let me know your experience. And if you're enjoying these stories, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. Trust is something we all need, but it's something that's hard to rebuild once it's broken. It's a journey, and we're all in it together. Keep learning, keep growing, and never stop believing in second chances.